Hi guys, Caitlin here. So for my community health project, I decided to work with substance abuse in New Mexico, in looking at some of the epidemiological statistics given by the New Mexico Health Department. It was found that we have the second highest overdose death rate in the nation, which is actually pretty horrible, and I didn't find that out until after I decided to do this topic, which is really weird. So with addiction, some of the negative consequences from problem drinking include domestic violence, crime, poverty, unemployment, as well as chronic liver disease, motor vehicle crashes, and other injuries, along with mental illness and a variety of other medical problems. With drugs, other than alcohol in New Mexico, we are plagued with related societal conditions of crime, violence, homelessness, loss of productivity, and spread of bloodborne diseases such as HIV and hepatitis. So recently we've had an increase in using drugs that have a high potential for abuse, like heroin and methamphetamine. And actually in one of the interviews, one of the ladies said this might be tied to Breaking Bad, so I'm not sure. Typically drug overdoses are unintentional, being the largest subset of the totality of overdoses. So what I did in my research was I began it with a case study. And so I met these two people, initially just the woman, but it turns out that she actually married a man who was also an addict, and they met each other in Narcotics Anonymous. So I did a dual case study on them as a joint kind of entity, and that kind of really introduced me to the community of which suffers from substance abuse. After that, I was introduced to some of the Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous meetings, which I attended along with them and on my own after being integrated with the community. So I learned how one is introduced to deviant culture, like with drug use and alcohol usage, and how people learn to abuse and overlook the warning signs of addiction. And that kind of perpetuates the choice model of addiction, where I also engaged in a public survey wherein I focused a lot on adolescents and asked them about if they knew a lot about drug treatment and drugs in and of themselves. I found that they couldn't really define a lot of categories like narcotics and whatnot. But I did see that they painted certain portraits of alcoholics and drug users, and so like the alcoholic is kind of this like bumbling, uncle kind of character who's problematic and like drinks too much and is kind of loud and annoying, or an alternative like a homeless man who is just in a drunken stupor. And drug users, it's not just like prostitutes dealing with heroin. It could be really anyone. A drug user could be me, and it could be you. I also found some individual cases with friends where the hospital's treating them poorly because you shouldn't drink, you shouldn't do drugs. So it just kind of perpetuates again that stigma. I use several methods, again, like I said, case study, survey, whatnot. I used participant observation and applying ethnographic principles to integrate in the community. And I had semi-structured interviews with the couple that I mentioned in the beginning, and there were some unstructured interviews with some of the people after the Alcoholics Anonymous meetings. I used PAR and which was integral in looking at struggling voices. A lot of the problems were accessibility in regards to seeking help, negative social consequences of drinking or using drugs, increase in drugs with abuse potential, portraits of people with substance abuse problems, a misconception as to what addiction means, and significant stigma that may serve as a barrier to getting help. Just a reiteration of some of the problems. So some of my proposals were just, I found that education is a very strong tool that we could use to combat some of these issues. We can explore a range of views, clarify attitudes, and challenge stereotypes, all of which people fall victim to. We can have skills. We can install skills that make the youth, or anyone, as a matter of fact, have informed decisions about their own autonomy and using drugs and using them safely. Campaigns such as Just Say No are ineffective, and shock programs do not work. Some of the harm reduction strategies would be like clean syringes for those who choose to inject drugs, and another example would be contacting services of like Harm Reduction Coalition and try to instill some sort of training to professionals in jobs that may reflect high rates of drug or alcohol use. This would address the stigma component again and bring awareness to resources and accessibility. I think that this project was eye-opening, and I never realized how bad the problem really was. So becoming connected to the community gave me invaluable insight and personal stories that really motivate me to understand like what these people go through. It just was never in the preface of my reality that this was such a horrendous thing that is afflicting like the community I'm from. I'm born and raised in New Mexico, so yeah, I'm glad to have been a part of it.